afternoon. I'm Glenn Elliott, and welcome to the Pop Culture Show. And what a show we've got for you today. Joining us is an undeniable pop culture icon, Kim Clarke Champniss. He started his career managing new wave bands such as Images and Vogue, worked as a VJ at MuchMusic, and later started a media production company called Invisible Republic. And he is now the executive producer of E! Entertainment Canada. So Kim, thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio. So you've had tons of different jobs over the past few years, very interesting jobs, and I'm curious to know, I've heard that you worked in the Arctic as a fur trader. So I gotta know, how did you go from fur trader to MuchMusic VJ?
Well, I was a precocious pop teen in London, England, and I wanted to get out of London at the time. And the Hudson's Bay Company at that time still had their head office in London. I was a schoolboy. I cut classes, went for the job interview, and 3 months later I was on a plane to Eskimo Point, Northwest Territories, and that's how I came to Canada.
So you're a little bit of a rebel, would you say?
That's an understatement.
But so when you got the job at MuchMusic, it obviously required you to have a lot of different qualities that separated you from the pack. So what would you say are some of the qualities you possess that made you so successful?
Well, let's jump around a bit. So fur traded to MuchMusic, there's about 10 years, and I was a nightclub DJ. I put myself through university as a nightclub DJ in Vancouver. And that morphed into managing band with Images and Vogue. And at that time, we're talking the new wave period on the West Coast, early 1980s. And I was a huge flag waver for the indie scene. It was taken on the established record labels. And you know what, when you slag people off enough, they say to you, well, if you're so smart, why don't you do it yourself? And suddenly I found myself in front of the cameras at MuchMusic, 1986. So
when you were growing up in Southwest London, I believe, what did you envision yourself doing when you grew up? Because you've had so many different careers. What were you, a little tot? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't want to be anything. I just wanted to be me. And at that time, a career in the music industry wasn't a valid option. People, here you are as students, that broadcasting and technology didn't seem to be a path that anyone pursued at the time. And when I fell into rock and roll, I always wanted to be a DJ. Like most kids spinning records, you want to be a DJ. And interestingly enough, I found that rock and roll actually gave me a home, and I felt welcome there. And I just grew with it. And suddenly when you're in an arena that welcomes you, you just grow and flourish, and it's led to all of this.
So music has obviously been really defining throughout your career. I just want to talk about pirate radio for a second. Pirate radio being the radio station that was illegal, broadcast 24/7. So what kind of influence did that have on you growing up or when you got to Canada?
It had a profound influence. You're talking 1964 to 1967 in Great Britain. And it was a revolution. It affected not only me, but it affected the whole youth revolution of Great Britain. And you only need to know the history of the Mods and the Rockers and why 24-hour pop music being beamed to that constituency was so important. Up till then, the BBC had a monopoly, and there was no 24-hour pop music. Radio Luxembourg, broadcasting out of the continent of Europe, was the only other option, and that didn't go on the air till 7 o'clock at night. So when pirate radio came, it really was a revolution, and for many of us, particularly as teens, were highly influenced by it.
So what do you think teens nowadays, do we have anything that you would say is equivalent to pirate radio, like maybe YouTube or something like that? Is there
well, you're on the right track, exactly like that. Back in the 80s, MTV and MuchMusic were the equivalent to North American youth in the same way pirate radio was. And I think in the 21st century, it's definitely YouTube, BitTorrent, all the other elements that are going beneath the radar of corporately controlled, legitimate outlets for pop. And what happens with rock and roll, it looks for outlets that aren't legitimate. That's sort of the defining quality of rock and roll. It's got to go against the establishment. So it looks for those doors that haven't been opened yet and finds a way to go through.
So an example would be Radiohead. They kind of, instead of making people pay for their music, and because they thought they'd be downloaded illegally, they gave it to their audience for free and said, pay however much you want. Do you think that's how the music industry is going to go?
That's a perfect example. That is one of the ways the music industry may go. There is no business model right now. No one knows. Not the record labels, not the whiz kids on the street doing strange things with their computers. But all ideas are valid right now. The whole world has been turned upside down. It is the digital revolution. All of your pop culture elements will come across the internet in some form. maybe not all of them. There may actually be a backlash. Heaven knows, maybe the broadsheets will start to be printed on Gestetner machines again. But definitely the internet is a revolution, and pop culture still needs to find its way through it.
So just quickly, I'm wondering exactly how it's going to go, and I'm really curious to know. But just before we go, you seem to have this attitude of it's not how old you are, it's how old you feel. And you seem to, have been doing so many different careers. So quickly, what can we expect from you in the future?
Well, I don't know what to expect from myself. Actually, I can tell you immediately, I've actually just been commissioned to do a radio show in addition to my other duties.
Oh, wow.
People are fascinated by the 80s, so I've been commissioned to do a 80s radio show along with Erica M from the MuchMusic Glory Days. And it's going to mine the 80s. So that's coming out, and I've just been commissioned to do a book on the 1980s as well.
That's fantastic. And Kim, I just want to thank you for coming out here. Wonderful. And there you have it, the inside scoop from a pop culture legend himself. Please join us next week for another exciting episode of the Pop Culture Show. Thanks for watching.